Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for being here. Today marks the first part of a 3-part series all about the bird sanctuary section here in Grassland Grove. Since I don't have every expansion pack yet, my current bird lineup is a little bit limited. I'm working with just 3 species that fit into the grassland biome. These are the greater flamingo, the common ostrich, and the Indian peafowl. Peacock. In this first episode, we're going to focus on the overall layout of the sanctuary and then move into how I've designed the flamingo habitat. So when I first started with the sanctuary, I wanted to map out the guest footpath first because honestly, water features are way easier to build around a path than trying to fit a path around water. It just makes the whole process a lot smoother. Plus, I wanted the footpath to feel kind of random and natural, curving gently around the habitat instead of being all straight and rigid. And when you look at my zoo so far, the path tends to be really straight lined, which works okay, but it doesn't quite capture that natural or organic vibe I'm going for here. Straight lines can make everything feel too planned or artificial from above. By making the path go a little bit more naturally through the space, it helps create that immersive feeling like you're really walking through the animal's natural habitat rather than just like walking down a sidewalk. For the staffing area, I've placed it right in the middle between habitats 1 and 2 in the bird sanctuary. Now, all of the bird species I'm featuring in the sanctuary are super social. They really thrive in massive groups. Take flamingos, for example. They like to hang out in flocks that can be as large as 500 birds. That's absolutely wild and honestly way more than I could realistically manage when it comes to daily maintenance and care in the zoo. But here's the thing, I still want each habitat to feel bustling with life and packed with plenty of birds so visitors really get that full immersive experience. So having a dedicated staff zone just for the bird sanctuary makes total sense. Plus, being centrally located means staff can easily move between habitats without wasting time or energy. So these habitats are going to have a ton of water. You'll see that there's a river running through each one, connecting them all together. I really wanted it to look natural and seamless. So I built this waterfall right at the start of the flamingo habitat. The idea is that the waterfall feeds water into the lake, making everything feel like one big connected ecosystem. Now, obviously it's not really natural because it's fake, but it looks pretty real if I do say so myself. So the big rock structure that I'm building here is the waterfall. I added a bunch of greenery to the top of the waterfall, making it look like it's gently dripping down the rocks. It looks so pretty and adds this awesome visual dimension. Plus, it feels super realistic because moss and plants love water and naturally grow around waterfalls and streams where there's constant moisture. So by adding those little touches of green cascading down, it not only makes everything more beautiful, but it's way more believable. At this point, I'm making some adjustments to the pathing because I wanted the path in the second habitat to include a raised section. The idea is that visitors can actually look down over the animals in the habitat below, giving it more of a visual dimension and making the experience way more immersive. I ended up tweaking it a little bit more, which I think is shown in the second part of this series, but this is the basic format. Now I'm doing more terrain modulation to build out the river through each of the habitats. You'll notice that I stop every now and again to add water and then remove it again. This might seem a bit repetitive, but I think it's super important. The reason I do this is to make sure there aren't any hidden issues waiting to pop up later when I finally add water to the entire river section. Sometimes when you try to add water, you get an error message because something in the habitat is blocking it. And if you've ever spent ages using the terrain tool with all of those tiny adjustments, only to be hit with that frustrating error right at the end, you know how annoying that can be. It's honestly one of the worst feelings because tracking down exactly what's causing the problem is basically impossible. So by adding and removing water as I go along, it helps to catch those potential issues early. The first and third habitats are designed to let guests move around freely because the animals there are totally comfortable with guest interaction. Since the only food court is way back in the welcome center, it felt kind of inconvenient for guests, so I'm building out another food court inside the third habitat. What's really cool about this setup is that while guests eat, the animals will actually walk around them. I've been to zoos where they do this kind of thing in real life, and honestly, I think it's such a fun concept. Back to the flamingo habitat to properly build it out, and I'm using the Zoopedia to check their natural habitat requirements to make sure I'm only adding the right kind of foliage. I used these green mossy rocks in the water with the savanna rocks above them for contrast and variety. I used a bunch of different rock styles so that it looked as realistic as possible, and of course used my very favorite rotation tool. Obviously, rocks don't look identical when you place them down in real life, so I wanted to replicate that here. At this point because I also needed to consider how the barriers would work and where I was going to place the habitat gate for the keepers to enter. There was really only one place where the gate would place properly, so that's where I placed it. I'm adding more rocks around the habitat now. These aren't just for decoration, they're going to act as the physical barrier once I add in a null barrier, so basically the rocks will be doing double duty. They'll look natural and pretty while also keeping the animals inside the habitat. At one point, I moved some of the rocks out of the way a little bit to clear an additional area for the flamingos so that they have somewhere to go to where guests can't see. This will help them not freak out if they're getting overwhelmed with the amount of guest interaction. You'll see that I've also added in the guest gates to enter and exit and mapped out an invisible path for guests to go out onto the island and properly walk amongst the flamingos. I bought 4 flamingos to start with, 3 females and 1 male. I do eventually go back and buy another couple of males. Whenever I'm dealing with animals that like to live in massive social groups, I generally have 1 male and more females and swap out the male each generation, which solves any interbreeding issues. The problem with flamingos is that they bond in pairs, so if you want lots of babies, which we do to build out their social group to over 100, you have to pair them up. I think I'll still minimize the number of males to like 3 and replace them each generation, which will solve the interbreeding problem and still allow them to breed a bunch. I built out the barrier around the habitat and checked to make sure that the flamingos have plenty of space, which they do, even with 500 flamingos. Now that the flamingos have arrived in the habitat, I'm confirming their environment needs. At this stage, they have no hard shelter, but do not fret, I have a plan for that. Before I get started on that, I finished off the barrier with rocks so it matched the rest of the barrier and blends together nicely. I double checked that there are no escape points for the flamingos and make some adjustments to the rocks to fix the problem areas. This is where I start building out the hard shelter for the flamingos. Honestly, it took me quite a bit of time, and yes, some serious Pinterest scrolling to really nail down what I wanted to do with this space. Since flamingos absolutely love water, I knew I wanted to incorporate that element again. Then I came across this super cool idea on Pinterest where guests actually walk through a cave and there's a waterfall flowing around the edges. It looked so magical and perfect for the flamingos. So that's exactly what I'm going for here. I'm building this big cave out of rocks, kind of like their own secret hideaway, and then adding waterfalls along the rim at the top so that the water cascades down all around them. It creates this beautiful natural vibe while giving them plenty of shelter too. And the guests can also walk through it, giving them a lot of close encounters with the flamingos. I'm now adding the decor to the very boring staff buildings. This is always the hardest part for me and where I struggle with creativity the most because I honestly don't care that much about the staff buildings. It does make a difference to negative impact on guests though, so it is important to the game. But yeah, my staff buildings are probably quite boring to watch me build. Generally, I try to make some kind of building out of the shape that I've already made with some standard walls. I try and mix and match wall types though, so they're not all identical. This one is the light wooden plank walls, which I feel blend in really well with the grassland and desert biomes, and then breeze block for contrast. Not super flashy or interesting, but they do get the job done so that I can move on to the more fun stuff. I imagine that at some point I'm probably going to have to edit the staff work zone area again for this habitat, or this section, the bird sanctuary section, because there's only one staff room at this point and it's quite small, so it doesn't house many staff. And I imagine that if we've got, like 100 birds in each of these habitats, we're going to have a lot of staff and they're going to need a much larger area. This is the point where I'm adding the waterfall jet special effects to the rock structure for the waterfall around the cave edge concept I was trying to achieve. That was a mouthful. It took a while to get the jets to sit right, so eventually I just duplicated the one stone with jets on it across so that it was all pretty even, and then I just battled a little bit with the sides to make it work. I'm so happy with how it came out though. The final result was exactly how I pictured it. After the water effects were added, I decided that the cave was a little bit dark and looked a little bit bland on the long wall, so I broke it up by adding in some glass. 2 birds, 1 stone and all that, ha ha ha. I did have to make some adjustments to the full structure to get this to work nicely, since the glass walls are on the grid system, but eventually it does work and it blends together. To further break up the rock, I add in heaps of greenery on the roof and along some of the walls, almost like ivy growing up the sides of it. This makes it look so lush and like the perfect oasis for flamingos. Greenery to the rest of the habitat as well, and this is where you can really start to see the vision come to life. I swear plants make such a massive difference to the overall vibe of a habitat. It looks so dead until you add them in, especially in desert or grassland biomes, so I make sure to add the absolute limit. I love this massive tree I include in the middle of the island area. It takes up a massive percentage of the flamingo's landscaping preference, but it also adds so much as well. I include even more rocks because apparently I don't have enough already. Also add in some foliage in the cracks and crevices of the rock walls, which breaks up the beige. I then used the terrain paint to make sure that the flamingos had their perfect ratio of terrain distribution. They love soil, which I had none of, but I did already have a really good distribution of everything else, so I didn't have to change too much beyond the soil. The final touch of this build is including all of the habitat stuff that the flamingo needs to keep them happy. So this means a bunch of food bowls scattered around. Possibly too many for now, but when the social group increases, I'll probably have to add in a few more. I love using the leaf bedding instead of the straw in grassland or desert biomes because it adds contrast. Otherwise, it just feels like there's just so much brown. Because the guests can walk around pretty freely in this habitat, it's always important to include do not feed and be quiet signs, otherwise the animals can get really sick or stressed out super quickly, so I put a few of them around the place. I added in some educational resources all around the place as well. I'm hoping that there's enough. I really need to add in some education tours around the zoo because they improve guest education so much. That's definitely going to be in a later video. there's a bunch of little things that I'm putting off, so I'll need to get to those at some point. So there'll probably be a video called A Bunch of Little Things. I know that I haven't included any food or toy enrichment yet. You've probably noticed that, but that's only because it hasn't been unlocked. Don't worry, I do go back in a later part and fix that once my vets have had a chance to unlock the enrichment items. I create a new staff work zone for the bird sanctuary and edit the mechanic work zone so that they can reach the flamingo habitat. And I hire some additional staff to maintain the birds. The last thing that I do is put the donation bins and trash bins all around the area so that the guests hopefully don't just throw their rubbish on the ground. That is everything that I have for you today, so thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you have any suggestions at all for habitats or grassland animals you'd like to see me add to the zoo, please let me know in the comments below, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!